Hey guys, welcome back to the Play on Footy YouTube channel. My name's Bailey, and today we're going to be rounding up the round 9 games this weekend. Wow, we had some big surprises. We had some big sort of close games and a drawn game in the end. But yeah, they're starting off with the first game of the round, which was Carlton and Melbourne, and boy, did this one really live up to expectation. Carlton really did kick away in the sort of first half of the game, with Melbourne slowly bringing themselves back in with Petrarca. He kicked 5-1 for this game, so really the comeback really started with him. But also in the final quarter, there was a couple of missed opportunities. Well, there's one in particular that comes to mind, but I'll get to that later on. For Carlton, it's no surprise, Walsh 143 AFL fantasy, as well as Cripps 123 AFL fantasy, and Newman 90 AFL fantasy. And for Melbourne, Petrarca 134 AFL fantasy, Neil Bullen 113, and Viney 113 as well AFL fantasy. As I mentioned earlier, I really like Petrarca, his game up forward, trying to steer the ship, I should say, kicking 5 goals, 1, and then Gawn kicking the massive outside 50 goal in the last quarter. And then on return, Jack Martin kicking a goal in the first quarter, his first touch, first goal back since injuring his knee. What I disliked about the game was in the last quarter, there was a missed opportunity by Harrison Petty, and he had a very quiet night by his standards, kicking 1 behind in the last quarter. Kasai Pickett for Melbourne went missing, in my opinion, kicked 1 goal, 1, and just had a really quiet game, and really didn't do much really throughout the game. And Bailey Fritsch as well for Melbourne, 1 goal, 1. I thought he could do a lot more, but apart from Petrarca really leading from the front, unfortunately Melbourne really didn't have too many others up forward that were really sort of lifting the weight really. I think in the centre there as well, Gawn was under a lot of pressure from the Carlton ruckman Pitternet, and I honestly think there was some times during that night where I thought he was probably in front of Gawn, but the way Gawn sort of in the last quarter really, stamped himself on the game and kicked that goal from outside 50 to bring it within a kick, also no, a goal, I think, a point. It was a point. I really thought it could swing either way. So that's my 2 cents there. The next game was Cats versus Power. Cats got shell-shocked by the Power at GMHBA, 95 and 101. Zach Guthrie for the Cats, 104 AFL fantasy. Holmes, 101 AFL fantasy. Myers, 90 AFL fantasy. And for the Power, in the absence of Rosie and Power Pepper, Wines really stood up, 133 AFL fantasy. Butters, 128. And JHF, Jason Francis, 113 AFL fantasy. I really liked JHF's game for Power. I think he really stepped up in the absence of Rosie and Power Pepper, and also gave him that sort of another forward entry option as well. I really like that. The other one was Rioli. Yeah, Rioli really stepped up. I think I did say in the previous video that I really wanted Rioli to step up and do something, and I think he really owes it to the Power fans. And yeah, he really did step up. I think he kicked 3 goals for the night, but yeah, all in all, I thought he played quite well. There was a lot of pressure around the ball from him, and his goal craft and goal sense was fantastic. What I also really liked was Port Power's 6-goal start really stunned the Cats, and the Cats really had to work really hard to get back in there. They almost got them, but the Power were just so resilient at defending when the ball was in their sort of front half for the Cats. They were able to really defend that and to win the ball back, and 9 times out of 10 they were able to just score from turnovers, which was really pleasing to see. What I disliked was for Port Adelaide, Dixon wasn't really up to his best. I think he had a very quiet game for his standards. Luckily they had Finlayson back as well. Another one, for the Cats, it was Hawkins. He went MIA. He did kick a goal, so he broke his 1-month goalless streak. But I just felt like they could have used another another small to work into their midfield, which Adelaide did today with Rankin, but I'll talk about that later. And what else did I disliked Henry. The Henry brothers, Ollie Henry and his brother, just really quiet. So and Jack Henry, so they're just really quiet there for Geelong. And yeah, they're the two brothers that I wanted to mention that were a little bit quiet. But overall, the game in itself was high pressure, but the power really brought it in the first quarter, and I think it just looked like the Cats were just constantly trying to catch up, which is credit to the power. They really came out, and I don't think a lot of people gave them a chance in this game. They had Vestantini, the ruck, basically shouldering the load from Jordan Sweet, who was out with the illness. And then obviously they had a couple of injuries in that showdown, which, really a lot of us punters wouldn't have given the power a chance. I certainly didn't tip for them. But good on them. They really are back in it now, and they're certainly well and truly in the 8. Next one is the Dockers versus the Swans. Very sad news about Cam McCarthy. So a lot of the players I felt didn't really want to go through with the game, I'm sure. Like, they were probably, very emotional, and it would have been a very hard time for them. Obviously, Nat Fyfe and Alex Pearce would have played with McCarthy as well as Walters, I believe. But yeah, no, super, super sad. But the Dockers, they held strong, albeit that they just couldn't convert. They had so many opportunities. They had 19 scoring shots to the Swans, who had about 23. So it's just one of those things that if they converted, a lot of their star forwards, which I'll get to later, just weren't firing. So Jeremy Sharp, he had a massive game for the Dockers, 118 AFL fantasy, 2 goals, 2. And then you had Sarong, 107 AFL fantasy, and Luke Ryan down back. He's an absolute star. If you don't have him in your AFL fantasy team, get him in. Luke Ryan, 105. And then for the Swans, Ollie Florent, 1 goal, 135 AFL fantasy. Lloyd, 112. And Heaney, good old Heaney, 106. He's doing an amazing job. As I said to you before, I really liked Sharp. He was on fire. He was bound for a big game. He's had a couple of 70s in the last couple of weeks, but he's been doing really well. He did really well this game, obviously. And then the next one was Blakey, the Lizard, patrolling that back line for the Swans. He's amazing. He did get injured in the last sort of quarter. I think it was like halfway through the last quarter. So he could have obviously polled a lot more in his AFL fantasy. And then Haywood, kicking 4 goals as well. Will Haywood, fantastic. What I disliked was Roberts. Matt Roberts was really quiet. This is the second time now. So if you've got him in your AFL fantasy, just think about what you're going to do there. Tracy, 1 goal, 1. Missing in action. Yeah, I guess their inside 50 delivery really let their forwards down, because the next one on my list here is Amos. He kicked 1 behind. So yeah, Amos is coming off that concussion a couple of weeks back against the Eagles. I don't think he's 100% yet, but there's just a couple of those things that really set the two teams apart. You can really see where the Swans are really good structurally, from the middle to inside 50, and obviously their backs have always been good for Blakey, but that's no different with the Dockers. The Dockers have a very strong back line. Their mids probably just got outworked on Friday night, and then their inside 50s, and then obviously the lack of opportunities. So they had opportunities, but they weren't able to really capitalise on the opportunities. Really set these two teams apart, and that's why you've got Swans on top and Dockers. They're really, I think they're just struggling. They just need to rework their structure. And I think because they've had a bit of a jolt, they haven't had much continuity because of Darcy coming back in, then injuring himself, then going back out. I think that's sort of left a gap open with Jackson. And I don't really think Jackson's really mastered his ruck craft's there, but his forward nous is lacking a bit because he only kicked 1 behind in this game. And I really wished he could have done a bit more, but because Darcy's out, it hasn't allowed him to really build into the role, which they probably need as a third tall up there. So yeah, that was my 2 cents. Next one is the Hawks versus the Saints. 58 at the Hawks and 53 to the Saints. Lloyd Meek was massive, 124 AFL fantasy. John Newcomb, big game for him, 112 AFL fantasy. And Carl Amon, 111 AFL fantasy. And for the Saints, Rowan Marshall went big in this game. 164 AFL fantasy, and then you got Steele. He's really consistent. 131 AFL fantasy, and Bonner 129 AFL fantasy. What I really liked was Josh Battle's 2 goals. I really liked Dylan Moore's 2 goals, and the Hawks really put the pressure on the Saints early, and I think that really tactically made the Saints uneasy under Ross. And I think, it harks back to, the Alistair Clarkson days. I think Mitch was really channeling what he learned in those days and putting it all across the board, especially with Gunston and Bruce helping him, coaching from the bench as well, just to try and lead the youth up a little bit. And I think they really did well, considering there's been a couple of dark days for the Hawks earlier this season. And then what I disliked about the game was Henry was really quiet. So Liam Henry's back from his his hamstring. He did play last week, but he's just a bit quiet. He's trying to work back into the game, I believe. King as well. He missed a mark in the last quarter in the dying stages that he could have taken the mark, and then had a set shot inside 50. And I think it was in the last 30 seconds. So I think he'd be a bit rotten at himself from that. And as I said before in the last video, Membry's really quiet as well. He kicked 1 goal 1 in this game. Membry's because they missed Jack Higgins. They missed Jack Higgins, so there's another little crafty 4 that they were missing in this game. So Membry really had to step up, and I just feel like there's still, from the senior core list that they've got at the Saints, there's not many members that are really stepping up, and that's how I felt in this game as well. Which, when you look at it on paper, Saints should be really leading from the front, which unfortunately they just missed this opportunity to win this one. Next one is the Bombers versus the Giants. Nick Martin, huge game, 121 AFL fantasy. Redmond, 128 AFL fantasy. And then McGrath, 99 AFL fantasy. And for the Giants, it was Green. Tom Green, that is, 98 AFL fantasy. Briggsy, 94 AFL fantasy. And Ash, 85. Bombers won 82-62. What I liked was Langford's 4 goals for the Bombers. He's really stepping up in that forward role and making amends for his Anzac Day missed opportunity. Guelphy with 3 goals as well. You can't discount his effort in this game. It was phenomenal. And also Sam Taylor with 7 marks. He was really good at his intercept marking game is amazing. Just to know where he positions himself under the ball at any given moment is fantastic. He's a real asset to the Giants. What I disliked was Stringer's pretty costly earlier on in the game. He kicked 2 behinds, and then I think in the third quarter he kicked a goal, or in the last I think it was, but he did change his knacks, but he wasn't really up to his same standard, which is something that I'd like to see change in the next game. And Cadman for the Giants really didn't do anything. He did try and bring the ball to ground when it was in the air. As a tall forward, that's mandatory in my opinion, but apart from that, he didn't really add anything to the structure that they were trying to build in the forward line there. So another one there for the Bombers, I've got his Parrish, very quiet with only 16 disposals. So I don't know if he's heavily tagged in this game, but yeah, he just didn't have the same influence from last week. Next game is the Tigers versus the Bullies. Tigers 42 to the Bulldogs 133. This one was at the MCG. Massive injury carnage game for the Tigers, which I'll get to in a sec. But for AFL fantasy, you got Daniel Rioli 102, Shai Bolton 89, and Nan Curvis 82 in the ruck there. And for Bulldogs, it was Treloar 154. You got Richards 141 and James Harms 134. AFL fantasy had a massive game. Harmsy, ex-Melbourne Demons player. Treloar had a massive 41 disposals, that's what I really liked about this game. It's good to see him up and about, leading from the front. James Harms kicked 4 goals, as I said. Massive game for him. He's played a lot of time in the VFL, so I think for him to get an opportunity it's really great to see, especially at another club like the Western Bulldogs. And I think he's got a lot to offer still, which I'm sure Bevo would look at that and go, well, we could definitely use you for a bit longer, I think. And Norton kicked 4 goals. What I disliked was the Tigers' injuries. So they had Morris, Rioli, Banks and Graham injure themselves. So just a massive injury carnage night for them. And they've already got a massive injury list as it stands, and an old list for that matter, because they were resting Camden McIntosh and Grimes down back. So this game, as you could imagine, is just blown right out. They've got their 2 big key defenders, senior key defenders out. So this result to me isn't really surprising. What I also disliked was Lafau. He got no real sniffs at a goal, and as their primary forward, because Tom Lynch is out, he needs to really step up. I know it's his first year. The 25-year-old really needs to add something. The last time I saw him kick a bag, 3 goals, I think was against the Eagles, but apart from that, I haven't really seen it since. And as I said earlier, Tigers of old, they've just got an aging list, and it really shows. One more thing that I dislike about this game is Hugo Hagen. I know he's had a couple of personal issues, but kicking 1-2 in this game, I didn't really see much beyond that. I don't know if he's still I'm sure he's probably still struggling with his mental issues or family issues that he had a couple of weeks back. But he needs to really step up and contribute to the team, especially with Norton kicking 4 goals and a massive night for goal kicking. So that was just something I picked up as well. And the next game for the Saturday night footy is Suns versus the Kangas. This one was up in Darwin. Suns 120 to Kangas 52. Took Miller 108 AFL fantasy. Mac Andrew, the defender for the Suns, he's fantastic, 107 AFL fantasy. Cloesi, 100 AFL fantasy. And for the Kangas, LDU, 105. Zach Fisher, 103. And Colby McKercher, 83 AFL fantasy. What I liked about it was Fisher's 34 disposals. He's really added some good spark to his game with his kickouts, especially during that night. I really noticed that, and obviously his ball use is fantastic. Really good kicking. LDU 35 touches, 1 goal, 1. I think he had his moments during the night. Obviously, really dewy up there and very humid up in Darwin. But I thought his ball use was relatively clean most of the time. Cloesi just has that absolute spark and that run. So he kicked 2 goals and he had 23 touches, which I think is fantastic effort for him. What I disliked was Larky's 1 goal, 2 behinds. Shields 2 behinds. And Paul Curtis, 1 goal, 1. I think North's forward structure is really letting them down. I think their mids are slowly coming in and their backs slowly. Combin's a great addition, but I think Core's really showing that he can't really run out games. I think they just need a couple of more sort of key positions fixed. Like I think Core's one of them down back, and then up forward, it's just really it's hard because when I was watching this game, the North they were killed on turnover. That was the main thing I really noticed. But then they really struggled getting it forward or actually locking it in their forward line because the Suns' backs were just so good at getting it out of there straight away. So I don't think it's so much of a Larky problem. It's just that I think they need someone that can just really be used in the middle, but then also in the forward line, and they don't have a player like that in my opinion. I know sometimes Zerha goes up forward, but yeah, he's probably the only one I can think of at this stage. Last 2 games, so we got the Pies versus the Eagles. Pies 103 versus Eagles 37. This one was at Marvel Stadium. Dink Dacos 131 AFL fantasy. Jack Crisp 130 AFL fantasy. Josh Dacos 120 AFL fantasy. And for Eagles, Witherden 108 AFL fantasy. Duggan 102 and Cole 96. All backman because the ball was down the forward line of the Pies, so in the Eagles back half most of the time. What I liked was Nick Dacos, 36 touches, 1 goal, 1, absolute class, played in the middle most of the time, and Harley Reid actually was on him for a bit as well, which was interesting to see. That Jewel Witherden, 31 touches and 8 marks, and Crisp 32 touches, 1 goal, 1. That's what I really liked. What I disliked was Darling's 1 behind. I know he's trying to obviously take Jack Williams under his wing and guide him, and Jack Williams converted, kicked a goal today, which was great to see. But I don't really know. Other than Darling, he used his body a lot, which is really good to give a bit of space to Jack Williams or a Ryan Marrick. Ryan Marrick kicked a goal as well, but yeah, apart from that, I guess we just needed the experience in the side. That's what he brings, so I think we can't really drop Darling, but it's just, it'd be nice for Darling to kick a couple for sure. Hunt, 12 disposals. I think he was played on the wing and then sometimes in the middle, but I don't know, I don't really know what Simo's planning with him, but he could be used for so much more, and I just don't know why he doesn't get much of the ball. And then Jinbi, I should say, the ball use let him down today. I think he had 19 touches, but yeah, his ball use, basically his delivery by foot really needs a bit of work. I think he just felt rushed a little bit most of the time. But all in all, I think it was pretty good. There was a good mark of the year contender by Harley Reid. I put that up on my YouTube shorts if you want to go and have a look at that. But yeah, that was a pretty good effort. But yeah, for the Eagles and Pies, I think I'm happy with the way Eagles are tracking so far, but with the Pies having so many injuries on the bench in this game, I would have liked the Eagles to have a bit more forward pressure dominance, which was just lacking. Luckily, we had McGovern and Barras. McGovern for half the game, he went out with sore ribs yet again. But yeah, if we didn't have McGovern or Barras, it would have been a 100-point blowout for sure. Last game, this one was like a bit of a nail biter game, to be honest. Pretty equally weighted sides. Crows versus Lions, 90-90 a pair. It was a draw at the Adelaide Oval. Dawson 118 AFL fantasy, Crouch 117 AFL fantasy, O'Brien 112 AFL fantasy, Josh Dunkley 114 AFL fantasy, Jared Berry 110, and McInerney 109 for the Lions. What I liked was Josh Dawson, 27 touches, Rankin, 3 goals, 1, and he was used in the middle as well as forward. I think that was a masterstroke coaching by Nix to do that. And I think that's what I'm trying to say with the North Melbourne side. They need someone that they can have forward, but then also move to the middle when they need a bit of explosive speed out. Darcy Fogarty, 4 goals, 1. That's what I also liked. And what I disliked was Darcy Wilmot for the Lions, 12 touches. Normally a real good get up and ball getter sort of player, but really missed the mark this time. Cam Rayner, 2 behinds, and I would like to see him sort of play more on ball than in the forward line. And then Eric Hipwood, 1 goal, 2, which, yeah, again, Hipwood is... and Danaher for that matter, they're struggling a little bit at the moment, the big 2 forwards. So that's just something. There was a couple of key moments there which Hipwood could have gone back and kicked it, albeit they're outside 50, but that's normally within his range. Anyway, guys, what do you guys think? Please comment below, subscribe, like, and yeah, we'll see you in the next round. I'll do the predictions next, and yeah, round 10 looks like it's going to be a massive. Cheers.